Hello, and thanks for joining us today. My name is Matt Gamache. I'm the Managing Director of Renewables here at Competitive Energy Services. I've been with CES for 6.5 years, and in that time worked on a variety of sustainability and renewable strategies for a number of our clients. And today I'd like to present on some of the lessons learned from that work, as well as some of the most recent thinking that we're doing to help organizations consider what renewable energy options are right for them. To start, we know that when an organization is looking at purchasing renewable energy, there are an overwhelming number of varieties and options to choose from. And those can be difficult to put into context and compare with one another. So I thought I'd put it in an analogy that's fitting for these dog days of summer, which is trying to put all renewable energy options in terms of ice cream. To start, we like to differentiate between two fundamental types of renewable energy options. The first falls into an unbundled category, meaning the renewable attributes or renewable energy credits, frequently called RECs, are sold and marketed completely separately from the electricity itself or any other attributes that the renewable generator might sell in the wholesale electricity market. So in this case, we're just looking at those RECs, and by far the most frequent purchase of unbundled renewable energy comes in the form of a voluntary REC. In ice cream terms, your voluntary REC is simply buying ice cream. You don't necessarily have to get to control the source or the flavor, but you do know that it's genuine ice cream, and ice cream is good. That's what you're after. It will cool you down on a hot day. It's that renewable energy that you're seeking. You know it's Green certified, perhaps the most common certification body in the US for voluntary RECs. And this option is so popular because it's the cheapest option, and it's also very flexible. You can buy these RECs in a variety of quantities. You can buy them to true up to some total number, or you can buy them to cover your entire portfolio. They can also be flexible in their contract terms. You can buy them on the spot market at any given time with a variety of vintages. You can buy 1, 2, 3-year, 5-year contracts. So that flexibility and that fairly affordable price point is why voluntary RECs are the most common choice for folks considering renewable energy. One step up from your voluntary RECs, we would look at compliance RECs. And compliance RECs in ice cream terms gives you a little bit more control. You could pick a specific flavor, which would equate to maybe targeting a specific renewable technology or a particular region that you want that ice cream to come from. In this case, compliance RECs are bought and sold in compliance markets throughout the country. Any state with a renewable portfolio standard will have a compliance REC market associated with it. And buying in a compliance REC market, while it gives you that much more control over the type of ice cream, the quality of that ice cream, it's still very similar to a voluntary REC in that they can be purchased typically through bilateral transactions on a spot market or on 1-year, 2-year, 3-year, multiple year terms. So in that way, they can be just as flexible in their term length, but they are typically more expensive. And that's because that compliance market is often set up to help incentivize more renewables or incentivize more ice cream. And buying into that compliance market, you know that your purchase is adding to that incentive by adding more demand for ice cream as a whole. However, a lot of organizations are looking to go further than just buying more ice cream and adding more demand for ice cream on the whole. Organizations are looking to have a more direct impact with their purchase of renewables, know that their purchase has explicitly led to a greater global supply of renewables or more ice cream production than there would be without their purchase. And this leads us to the second major category of renewable energy purchases, which we call bundled. In this case, the renewable attributes, those RECs, are now bought and sold in a transaction that also includes the energy in some capacity. In bundled options, first we have utility or supply products. In this case, in ice cream terms, you can think of being part of multiple buyers who are all buying your ice cream through some utility or some supplier who's gone out and contracted with multiple different sources of ice cream suppliers on your behalf. And in that way, there's a lot of nuance and a lot of difference between different utility or supply products. You'll read about green tariffs or green supply products, and they can't all be considered exactly the same. Each one comes with its own blend of ice cream suppliers, its own blend of quality, and understanding those nuances is key in understanding whether or not that particular product is going to align with your organization's goals. This is very popular in markets that are fully regulated. Utilities feel pressure from customers often to offer a product that is greener than what the grid would normally provide. So we've seen a lot of community choice aggregations or green tariffs spring up in those markets. We also have a number of suppliers that we work with here at CES that are exploring green supply products and exploring opportunities for folks to contract with a renewable product. But again, the differentiation between those products is important to understand, and each product, it really needs to be understood on its own, and you need to delve into the details of where that ice cream is coming from. Along with that, there are varying costs that come with those utility and supply products that also need to be understood. Beyond buying your ice cream or your renewables through a utility or supplier who might have multiple contracts out there, you could also go out and buy the ice cream equipment yourself. You know, maybe you buy a cow or two that's on your property, you buy the ice cream making equipment. In this case, it's the equivalent of a distributed generation project, a small scale renewable project that might be on your company's rooftop, on your property. It could be either behind the meter or net metered or virtually net metered. And really, whether or not this project is going to make sense for you is going to depend on your own situation. Exactly what your consumption profile looks like, what your demand for ice cream looks like seasonally and also day to day. It's also going to depend greatly on what region you're operating in and what state incentives or state programs might exist, what utility tariff you're on, and whether or not avoided purchases behind that utility tariff are going to benefit you, and how does that compare to the cost of investing in a distributed generation project. So there's, again, very unique situation for each individual client who might be looking at a distributed generation project, but it comes with some clear benefits. You've got that renewable project right there on your property. It's very clear where that ice cream is coming from. The ice cream is right there. You can see it, you can interact with it, and that carries with it a number of benefits. But it's very difficult, depending on your situation, to do that at a scale that's going to match your organization's overall demand for energy and supply 100% of your renewable energy needs or 100% of your ice cream demand. So that leads us to our final option. Thanks to Zach for that cow moo. But our final option would be a direct commitment to a project through a power purchase agreement or a virtual power purchase agreement. In this case, you're making a long-term commitment to a renewable energy project, or to, in ice cream terms, a factory or farm that produces ice cream. And by making that commitment, you know that that factory or that farm is going to come online and provide a greater overall supply of ice cream in the whole global ice cream supply, more renewables, less carbon, and you can much more directly tie the impact of your action to an additional project on the grid. There's a lot of differentiation in types of PPAs and VPPAs you might look at. You could focus on something in your region versus out of region. But in general, these are going to come with a longer term commitment. And typically there's quite a bit of financial complexity that accompanies a transaction like this. And while you might have strategies or you might target a market that could help to mitigate your risk, inherently it's going to be a much riskier option to invest directly with that ice cream farm than it would be to simply go out and buy that vanilla ice cream cone that you see in the voluntary rec option. And so that's what establishes this spectrum here from the most complex, but also perhaps most impactful action of contracting through a power purchase agreement or VPPA, and on the other end of the spectrum, your unbundled renewable energy options. So as you look along the spectrum, some key differentiators in choosing which pathway might be right for you is the concept of additionality. I've alluded to that throughout this description, but the idea that your action is adding an additional renewable resource onto the grid, as well as geography. Certain options shown here may be more or less available to you depending on which geography you operate in. So you may not always have the flexibility to do a project on your site based on what sort of net metering laws exist in your state or what sort of property or space you have to host a renewable project. And so that option might be off the table, for example. So additionality and geography, both keys in sort of guiding you along this spectrum of options. When it comes time to choose which pathway is right for you, based on what options are available, you may start to look to your peers for some guidance to say, what are others doing in the renewable procurement space, and how do my actions match up to those peers? What we have here is a graph of renewable sourcing by members of RE100, which is a group of corporations, both national and multinational, who are committed to 100% renewable energy. And this is recent 4 years and the source of all renewable energy procured by those companies over that time. And you can see back in 2015, the vast majority came through unbundled recs, that simple vanilla ice cream cone or flavorless ice cream cone, shown in the blue at 60%. On top of that, you've got utility and supply products making up the remaining 35%. And the real trend you can see over these 4 years is as that blue area, the unbundled rec purchases, reduces, filling in that gap is almost entirely the red, the off-site power purchase agreement or virtual power purchase agreement. And this is emblematic of that trend of organizations trying to make a bigger impact with their renewable energy purchase, as you can do with that power purchase agreement or virtual power purchase agreement, as represented by the cow on that prior slide. So this is a trend that we're definitely seeing in the marketplace. This is in RE100 private companies, but we're also seeing higher education institutions and also municipalities look at similar types of trends, trying to have a greater additionality impact with their renewable energy purchase than they would have otherwise. And finally, when you're comparing your options, there's a few key assessment and evaluation metrics that we'll leave you with to consider. The first, and perhaps most obviously, is the cost of that renewable energy or the cost of RECs. So when you're looking at that spectrum of ice cream options, what's the premium you're paying for the investment directly in a farm versus just going out and buying a few cones of ice cream? Also important is your risk tolerance. Consider what sort of future risk might you be signing up for with one renewable purchasing option versus another, and how does that fit with your organization's specific risk profile and your objectives over the term that you're considering planning for. Second is additionality. This is sort of inherently tied to the cost. By making a greater financial commitment and a longer term financial commitment, typically you're going to offer more additionality with your purchase. but really asking that question, would this project exist without your entity's actions, is the way to determine whether or not your project or your purchase is leading to additionality. And as I mentioned on that prior slide, as we can see in that trend of RE100 purchases, additionality is frequently being considered as an important metric in evaluating renewable energy options. Third is location, whether you want to target your renewable purchase in your region or perhaps indifferent and open to options out of your region. You might also consider the relative amount of carbon displaced. Carbon's impact is the same no matter where it's emitted from, and whether investing in a project on a dirtier grid might have a greater carbon displacement impact than displacing carbon on a relatively cleaner grid. So a lot of different options that might lead you to one geography or another. And finally, timing shouldn't be ignored. Many of the projects you're looking at, especially if you're looking at a new project that might offer additionality, the online date, the term of that contract, and how does that align with what are your objectives for obtaining renewable energy? Do you have a specific goal that you're trying to achieve, and will this project be online in time to meet that goal? This is especially important right now in the current situation with COVID-19 causing some delays in supply chains and in project development. So that's an important factor to pay attention to when you're signing a contract or considering a project. And one final consideration that sort of can have a big impact on all of these metrics is policy and how that influences the opportunities available to you. I'll leave you with an example from the state of Maine, the state I'm coming to you from today, the state that CES is based in or headquartered in. We, a few years ago in the state, had many clients and organizations who were looking to purchase renewable energy here in the state, and seeing peers in Massachusetts or in Rhode Island, as shown in the picture here, contracting with larger scale solar and renewable projects and benefiting through net metering programs in those other states, but found that they were unable to make the economics work for them here in Maine. And then just last year, Maine's legislature and governor worked together to overhaul the state's net metering program, and now many of our clients here in Maine are looking at options where they're procuring, in some cases, close to 100% of their renewable energy from sources here in the state, and many of them are looking at economic benefits as well. So it's just an example of how a shift in policy at your state or regional level or even the federal level could have a big influence on what options are available to you and how each of these evaluation metrics stack up from year to year. So something to consider and something to follow closely in your state or in the regions you're operating in. So that covers everything we wanted to convey today about renewable energy options, what's available to you, and how to decide what option might be right for you. There's a variety of ways to purchase renewable energy, as you've seen here today, and CES is here to help you evaluate those options, help you consider what option might be right for you, help you consider how a portfolio of options might fit well together and align with your organization's goals and objectives. That's something we do frequently for our clients, and we'd be happy to work with you to do it for you too. So thank you very much for listening today. If you enjoyed the video, if you found it useful, we have a lot of other resources on our website, competitive-energy.com. Click on the CES University page, and that'll lead you to some links to access those other resources. Thank you again for listening, and hope you have a good rest of your summer. Enjoy some ice cream.